This is the Truth Network.
Bible Wonders of Habakkuk. How fun today. We get to the 5th verse in the first chapter of Habakkuk. And that 5th verse would be the letter Hey in Hebrew. And clearly now it's God's going to talk. And it's very cool that the prophet is giving his words about what he's going to do. And so we'll read this in English, and I just think it's amazing. It says, "Behold," and again, I believe this is God speaking, and very cool that the prophet wrote it this way. "Behold ye among the heathen, and regard and wonder marvellously, for I will work a work in your days, which ye will not believe, though it be told to you." And so here again, I just think it's amazing. The letter Hey has to do with expression, and obviously we know God spoke the world into existence. And so this idea of God expressing himself to the prophet is just in itself a complete miracle. And here's this expression telling Habakkuk that he's going to do something that will literally blow his mind, that he won't even believe it. And it's really fascinating to me the way that it's all structured, and it says that he's going to work a work. In other words, Habakkuk, you're going to see this happen, and you're going to not think it's from me, but it's definitely God who is working this work. And so as I really processed what was going on here, I thought it was absolutely the case where God is disrupting and dismantling Habakkuk's life because he's trying to show him something that he totally misunderstands. And that is all things work together for good. and the righteous will live by faith is obviously where this is all headed. But clearly in the way that he is saying to wonder marvelously, to look, behold, he's telling him, pay close attention. I want you to ponder these events and what's going on. He's telling him that not only am I doing this, but I'm doing this because I want you to see what it is that you're seeing. And as we talked about in the previous verse, it's a clear picture of really how God used Jesus, or he used Joseph. And so many times it looks like the home team is down for the count. And it's absolutely the opposite that's actually happening, is that God's plan is going forth. And what those people meant for evil, God is meaning for good. And the idea of God's judgment is going to go forth, and God's judgments are right. I mean, they're just absolutely beautiful. So this morning, as I was studying something else, actually, God put this together with something he wanted to teach me that kind of blew my mind, in that as I was praying, as I get up early in the morning and before I begin to study the Word, I love to go to the Lord in prayer, and often I try to surrender, my spirit, my soul, my body, my heart, my mind, and my will. It's something I do every morning, and this idea of giving it all to God and letting him take my life, and the idea is to surrender. And so I thought, well, let me go back and look up surrender again in Hebrew. And as soon as I started to look at it, I remembered, oh yeah, the word surrender is not in the King James Version of the Bible, so it's always a challenge to find that word surrender. And so I was trying to see words that would have to do with surrender, which is, by the way, kind of what Habakkuk needs to do here. As he surrenders, he'll begin to get the picture. But nonetheless, as I started to study that word, I thought, oh yeah. In Hebrew, quite often, or in the Old Testament, you might hear this word, given into your hand, or come into my hand. In other words, when they were going into the enemy's hand, they were surrendering to some extent. And then I happened upon, right, as I was looking at that, into my hand, or into your hand, I went to the 31st Psalm. And in the 31st Psalm is the verse, into thy hand I commit my spirit. And as I went, wow, let me look at that, because clearly, that was Jesus's last words from the cross in the book of Luke. And if you ever studied the 7 last words of Jesus, I mean, this is his final word. And it was actually Stephen's final word, into thy hands, I commit my spirit. And so that word commit kind of blew my mind when I went and looked, because it was kind of be like, into thy hand I surrender my spirit, seemed to fit to some extent. But the word commit in Hebrew was the word pakud. And I know that may not sound anything to you, but it was gigantic to me, because the word precepts throughout the 119th Psalm is this same idea. It is the same Hebrew letters of a pei and a kuf and a dalet. And when you put those three together, you get this idea of that King David, even, verse after verse, he talked about the statutes. Like even in the verse section of the 119th Psalm, he says, thou hast commanded us that we keep thy pakudim, thy precepts, diligently. And so as I'd studied that word in the 119th Psalm time and time and time again, I came to the conclusion, and it's true, that it quite often is translated to muster, or to come under another authority, but to gather together. Because when you put that idea, here's an expression coming out of the mouth of God, that pei, and that kuf means that you're gathering in, you're in close proximity to God. And when you put that dalet in there, it's like you're falling in under his authority. And so I thought, well, wow, look at this. Jesus was literally, into thy hands I commit thy spirit. In other words, I'm totally trusting you, God. And in fact, in some of the translations where they translate that verse in the 31st Psalm, it says, into your hands I entrust my spirit. And so as I began to think about that, is, in a way, God is trying to tell Habakkuk, look, as you begin to realize all these things, God is working the work. And if you will surrender, right, and allow him to be God, and to realize that, he is not only involved, he's right there on the spot. And although, as it said in the previous verse, remember it said the law would go quiet, or the law would go slack. Even though it would appear the law would go slack, what you said in the previous verse there, Habakkuk, is not necessarily true, because he said justice will never go forth, right? And wrong judgment is going to proceedeth. That's the end of the previous verse. And so it's like, Habakkuk, get ready, because what you think is wrong judgment that is going to proceedeth is exactly what I have in mind. Joseph had to go into the pit. Joseph had to go into jail. His brothers did these things in that all of God's plan would work out. Jesus had to go to the cross in order for me to get salvation. He would be ensnared. He would be compassed about by this evil. And so, I don't know what's going on in your life, but I can't help but think of 1 Thessalonians 5, and I don't know that Paul could have put it any better than he did. It was, if we pick it up in verse 16 in 1 Thessalonians 5, it says, rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. In everything, right? It's like, pay attention, wonder marvelously, because what is happening is God's will concerning you, and give thanks, because believe me, God is in this. God is doing it. And, I love that verse in the 119th Psalm. It says, Lord, I know that thy judgments are right, and in faithfulness thou hast afflicted me. But then it's followed up by, let thy merciful kindness be for my comfort, though. And, it's like, I know all this stuff's going down, but can you give me a hug? I love, love, love that. And that idea of, I'm entrusting you, I'm hugging you, right? I'm going into your hand and just entrusting you. Lord, into your hand I commit thy spirit, right? So what's going on in your life right now that you can just let go and into his hand, commit thy spirit? Thanks for listening.